Hey, what's up, everybody? So, in case you guys haven't been tuned in to my Twitch channel, I've been doing daily streams up towards Capcom Cup, sort of talking about the brackets. We've done a bunch of bracket predictions. We did one where we let the chat decide it. We did one where I decided. We did a really cool one where we the Smash GG one, which is where you get a roster of 8 players and you sort of decide who's going to win Capcom Cup. Been a lot of discussions on my stream, right? Hours and hours of footage that lots of people, I'm sure, have tuned in and enjoyed. Or hated and thought I was a moron. But now it's time to sort of summarize my thoughts coming into Capcom Cup, talk about the year, give you guys a little breakdown. And since I'm not streaming today, right? Today is the Wednesday before Capcom Cup. I thought I'd just give you guys a little bit of a final look. So for those of you guys who are hoping for a stream today, sorry about that. We're going to be just talking Capcom Cup on the channel instead of doing something different. And I wanted to do more videos like this where I just sort of talk to my stream and kind of, you know, go over topics that I thought were interesting and stuff like that, give you guys peeks, looks, and I have a bunch of stuff like this planned in the future. So let's start to talk about Capcom Cup 2017. It's at the Anaheim Convention Center. It is also at the hotel right next to it for 2 days, right? The Anaheim Hilton, they have the first 2 days of Capcom Cup, Friday and Saturday. If you guys want info on it, head over to Smash GG in the sidebar on your left side, which is this side for you guys. There will be a bunch of different links to notable events. Capcom Cup will be on there. Check out the LCQ brackets in case you guys are curious about who's going to be in the last chance qualifier to make it into Capcom Cup. And also check out the main tournament bracket. It'll be on there. You can enter the fantasy bracket for free. I might be doing a prize giveaway for whoever makes it the furthest that watches my videos or my content or whatever. We'll see. Mostly we just kind of make those brackets for fun, and if you guys do well, there's prizes on there. So go ahead and check it out. Now jump into the meat of Capcom Cup. I don't want to talk too long about this, right? I kind of want to rest my voice for Capcom Cup. So I'm going to try to keep this nice and short and sweet. The main thing to talk about this year, really, the biggest storyline of all is for sure Punk. Coming into last year, just to set the stage, Punk showed up at Red Bull Battlegrounds, right? He was a qualifier from the Philly region. Everybody sort of talked about him. If you go back and listen to the commentary, me and the other guys especially, right? We were just basically saying, Punk is a guy who plays online. We know he's good. We've seen him play against people, you know, on the internet and do really well. He was against F-Champ in the finals of one of the CPT Online events. Like, we know he's good, right? We know he's a good player, but we don't know how good he was. And at the time, he was in the bracket. Boom, he beats Chris Tatarian, which is a big deal. At the time, Chris Tatarian qualified for Capcom Cup that year, tearing it up on the circuit. He was doing super well. That was a big surprise. Then, just dunks Justin Wong, beats Justin Wong. Obviously, Justin was tearing up the U.S. circuit. Every single event of the year, Justin is winning, right? Going into Capcom Cup, Justin was a big deal, right? So at the Battlegrounds, for Punk to beat him was huge. Then he has probably, which is one of two of the most, you know, important sets of his career, which is versus Tokido, right? He has a super close, kind of like by the skin of his teeth loss to Tokido, which is huge. And everybody says, you know, that Punk guy, he really impressed us. We're really kind of surprised at how well he did. And, you know, everybody was kind of sort of taken aback. Now, since then, Punk has gone from that guy we sort of thought about as the online player to competing and placing in events, you know, throughout the entire year. He had a big win, obviously, at E-League. He's won a ton of CPT premier events and ranking events throughout the year. He's had probably the best Capcom Pro Tour performance I could ever think of since the inception of the Capcom Pro Tour. To say that Punk has made the CPT his bitch is kind of an understatement. It's crazy. You know, if you look on the standings, Punk has over 3,000 Capcom Pro Tour points. For just reference, if you win a Premier, which is a super stacked, incredibly difficult event, right, you get 400 points. Punk is over 3,000. In second place is Tokido, who he's had those famous sets with, right? Tokido's at 2,125 points. To give you context of what that means, right? To give you context about what that means in terms of the bracket here. If there was today on Wednesday a premier event and Punk didn't enter it, Tokido won this premier event. If on Thursday there was another premier event, Tokido won that event and Punk did not enter. If on Friday they ran a ranking event and Tokido won that without Punk entering, he would just barely pass him in points. He would have to win 2 premieres and a ranking event to catch him, and that's the person in second place. Just think about that. That's how big the gap is between Punk and everybody else. If you look at the rest of the players on here, NuckleDu, Yukidon, and Haitani, they round out the top 5. They're over 1,200 points behind. They'd have to win 3 straight premier events just to even catch up to Punk, which is crazy. You have guys like Strider, who qualified in the Capcom Cup, about 700 points. That's about over 2,000 points behind Punk, right? That's how far ahead he is of everybody else in the Capcom Pro Tour. So when it comes into this event, when many people are predicting him to be the favorite, and a lot of people are saying, I just really don't understand how people can think Punk is that good and this and that. The numbers don't lie. He's been in grand finals after grand finals of, you know, a ridiculous amount of events, right? He's just been absurdly impressive the entire year, and it was a crazy rise, right? I mean, a year ago, before Capcom Cup, he's not qualified. People think, wow, that guy had a pretty good performance. Maybe one day he'll be a good player. That's sort of the guy we're talking about, and that's sort of the rise into competitive, you know, sort of exposure he's had, which is really interesting. The second big thing to talk about for sure is NuckleDu dropping out of the tournament. He is one of the highest seeds in the bracket, the third seed overall, the Capcom Cup 2016 winner. He is the champ, and him dropping out is a big deal. He is one of the strongest players in the world, third place overall. A lot of people say NuckleDu has dropped off this year, but I mean, I guess being third place from first is a big drop. In terms of points. Had an incredibly impressive 2016 as well as 2017. Drops out of the tournament for personal reasons that no one's quite sure about, which puts Ricky Ortiz in the bracket, runner-up for Capcom Cup last year. Has not gone to that many events in the second half of this year especially. Ricky basically said, look, I'm not interested in playing Season 2 of Street Fighter V. I'm kind of going to step back, and, you know, if the game piques my interest again, I'll play. Ricky has accepted the invitation, and nobody quite knows how Ricky will do. She's kind of a wild card coming into this event for sure. Another thing to talk about, you know, the whole year for the Capcom Pro Tour is the USA. At the start of the year, right, it was, you know, NuckleDu won last year. He won Red Bull Battlegrounds and then Capcom Cup back to back. He was looking really strong. He was killing it. He was traveling overseas and doing well, right? He went to stuff like the U-League in China. He was going to all these other events. People were talking about how good the U.S. was doing. At the start of the year, when we were about halfway through the year, in the top 10, there was about 4 or 5 U.S. players, maybe even more than that, actually, maybe like 6 or 7, and they were killing it. And, you know, at the start of the year, there are a lot of premier events in the U.S., so it's very easy for USA players to stack points, but that wasn't even the case. There was events like Combo Breaker. That's a premier. That was just littered with U.S. players. There's 7 U.S. players in that top 8, right? The U.S. was killing it at the start of 2017. Then the patch happens, the game changes a little bit, and the second half of 2017 they've had a ton of events in Asia, so all the Asia players sort of naturally caught up. But if you look at these top 8s, it's Japan, right? It's Japan just killing everybody, just, you know, tournament after tournament after tournament. You have guys like Yukidon, Haitani, Dogra just coming in and cleaning up at the end of the year. Kazunoko, Goichi, these guys, these Japanese killers are just really, really going to town. And you have guys like Punk who can fight back, but not everybody can. And so, you know, it's sort of one of those things where at the start of the year, you look at the leaderboard and the USA is killing it. And there's now this flip where if you look at the top seeds in this tournament, it's a lot of Japanese players. Heading into Capcom Cup last year, I thought a USA player would win. I thought NuckleDu would win the tournament. He ended up doing that. Coming into this year's tournament, I think Punk might win the tournament. I think he has a decent chance, but I'd be surprised if there wasn't at least 6 Japanese players in the top 8. My bracket, I have 7. I think there will be 7 Japanese players in the top 8. Japan has really come into their own. The game now is one of those things where they understand it. They play it at an incredibly high level. The more tech and the deeper the game develops, their work ethic really shines through, and you can start to see it in a lot of these matches. So yeah, I really think this is going to be one of, you know, a big showing for Japan in this one. So if you're a fan of the US of A, you better wave that flag while you can. Other thoughts is that the endurance of the CPT year might have gotten to some of the players. It seems like many people, this is common for a lot of the players, right? Start of the year, they show up and they do super well, and then they just sort of fall off towards the second half of the year. And whether that's fatigue, people are just sort of developing an understanding of how they play, a change in what characters are popular, more of their bad matchups coming out, whatever it is, it seems to be a common trend, right? We have guys like Sien who came out of the gate super strong, right? Final round, killed it right out of the start of the year. He's gathering points, he's doing well, and then the second half of the year, since EVO, he has not entered an open bracket CPT event. We haven't seen him at, right? We saw him at SEAM where he didn't do that hot, which was the Asia Regional Final, but it's strange. It's very strange to see him not performing that kind of way. You have guys like Snake Eyes and Bonchan, the 2 Red Bull players. Both of those guys were in the top 4 of CPT rankings heading into EVO. Think about that, right? Top 4 in CPT. Both of them have dropped down a pretty significant amount since then. And I don't think people see either of them going incredibly far in this tournament. It's crazy to think about. There's a lot of players like that who had a really strong start to 2017 were looking incredibly good, and they just haven't had that same kind of performance throughout the whole year. It seems like a common trend, and there's a few things that you can sort of attribute it to. On the reverse, there's a lot of players who have picked up steam about halfway through the year. A good example of that is Dogra, right, who sort of exploded onto the scene. He won a big premiere event, and then boom, he's just putting event after event after event. He was consistent. It was funny. Halfway through the year, Dogra was doing all right on CPT points, right? And a lot of people were saying, how is Dogra even in the running? How could it be, right? Dogra is not even that good. You would see people say that. Dogra is not even that good when he was putting, 9th place on a tournament here, 13th place on a tournament here, 7th place on a tournament here. He's placing in that position, right? He's battling for those top 8 spots. And he's now earned it. He's won a couple of premier events. He's really doing well in the second half of this year. There seems to be some kind of phenomenon where only one good Urian player may exist at a time. It's like when they look into the mirror, they can only see themselves. We had RB at the tail end of 2016. We had Nemo for the first half of 2017. Now we have Dogra, who's really stepped up and been a dominant force. And then you have guys like Yukidon, 3 premier event W's in the year, back-to-back. He's had a really great year in general. But yeah, second half of the year has felt great for him. Another really strong example is Problem X. EU's highest placing player in the Capcom Pro Tour this year. 6th overall. He is 5th in the bracket because NuckleDude dropped out. Has a really good chance. His path is a little hard for him depending on which players win in each matchup. But it's really impressive. I think, Europe consistently has 3 players that you look out for to be incredibly dominant and really represent their region at an international scale. It's usually Problem X, you have Phenom, and you have Luffy. And Problem X is that guy this year, right? He's had a great year this year. And I expect him to make it pretty far in the bracket this year as well. But the endurance of the Capcom Pro Tour year, this whole cycle where you have to play from February until December, is really weighing on a lot of people. And it seems like many people are sort of having a good start. They're having the push, and then things are getting to them. And a lot of players just step up in the second half of the year instead, and that's how they make their mark on Capcom Cup. I've talked a lot about the matchups that are in Capcom Cup, right? Each of the individual bracket matchups. We went over the first round. We watched those matches together on my stream. I did a fantasy bracket. I can link my Smash GG and my predictions down below. If you guys want to make your own brackets, I encourage you guys to do so. You can check out Capcom Cup this weekend. It's going to be on Capcom Fighters and I believe Capcom Fighters 2. I'm doing some commentary. I'm doing some analysis. On Sunday, you guys will see me doing a more analytical role than instead of commentary. It's going to be a good time. Definitely tune into the event and check it out. Even if you're not a big Street Fighter fan, maybe just pop your head in and see what it's like. Other than that, hopefully you guys enjoy the event and enjoy the weekend. If you have no interest in it, happy holidays anyway, and I hope you guys have a good one. I'm going to do more videos like this where I sort of just sit down and talk to you guys about topics I find interesting, especially fighting game related stuff. You guys have a lovely weekend, and I'll see you guys at Capcom Cup.